We continue now at the top of Daf Yomi Aleph from Meseches Megillah. This is Megillah Daf 19a. The Gemara is continuing to explain the various inks and parchments that were mentioned in the Mishnah. Kankantum, what is kankantum? Charta de ushchafi, that means black shoe polish. Diftera, what is diftera? That's a kind of parchment that's made from hide. Demeliach or kamiach, it means it was salted and it was processed. Literally, this means flour. Rashi says it means with water. Below afits, but not with gallnuts. So in other words, it wasn't fully processed hide because they didn't use gallnuts. And niyar, what is niyar? Mechaka, that's some kind of a paper. Rashi over here says mechaka min asavim asay al yedei devik. What they did was they used some grasses or reeds and they created a paper out of it. Again, all of those would not be good for use in creating a Megillah. And the Gemara continues at the two dots, quoting the Mishnah, Achete Ksuva Ashuris, it has to be written Ashuris, that's the regular Hebrew letters. Tichsiv, just like the Pasuk says, Kichsavam uchizmanim, as they are written and according to their times. Al HaSefer uvidio v'chulo, then it says it has to be on regular cloth and with the ink that we call dio. Minolan, from where do we know this? Asya Ksiva Ksiva. We learn it out of Gezer Shava from the word Ksiva. Ksiv Hach, it says over here, Vatichtov Esther Hamalka, it says that she wrote. Uksiv Hasam, and it says over there, Vayomer Lohem Baruch Midiv Yikare it's called Advarim Ha'ela. Vani Kosev ala Sefer B'dio. It says explicitly in the pasuk over here. This is a pasuk in Sefer Yirmiyahu. It talks about writing al HaSefer B'dio. Uses the same kind of language of ksiva, and therefore we understand it has to be al HaSefer B'dio. And the Gemara continues with the Mishnah, Ben Ir Shahalach L'Krach. Let's say you have a person who lives in a city, and this person goes to a walled city. Uven Krach Shahalach L'Ir, the other way around, goes from a walled city to an unwalled city. Imasid Lachzer L'Mkom, if the person plans on returning to his original place, Korei Kimakomo, he should read according to the day that he reads from where he's originally from. V'imlav, and if not, if he intends on staying where he is, Korei Himan, then he reads the Megillah together with the people where he is right now. So from where does a person read the Megillah? How much of it does he have to read in order to fulfill his obligation? So the Mishnah says, Rabbi Meir Omer Kula. Rabbi Meir says he has to read the entire Megillah. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Me Ish Yehudi. Rabbi Yehuda says he starts from the pasuk of Ish Yehudi. Rabbi Yossi Omer Me Achar Hadvarim Ha'ela. Rabbi Yossi says he starts from Achar Hadvarim Ha'ela. That's in the beginning of Paragimel of the Megillah Esther. And the Gemara says, Amar Rava says, Lo shanu elashasid lachzer beleila yudalid. This halacha in the Mishnah is only true if the person plans on returning to his city. Let's say he's really from a walled city and he goes to an unwalled city. He's planning to return that night of the 14th. But let's say he's not planning on returning the night of the 14th. He's going to be during the day of the 14th. He'll be in the unwalled city. So korei imoin. So in such a situation, he has to read with them. Rashi over here explains, Lo shana deven krach shahalach le'ir, v'yased lachzer l'mekom kore b'chamisha asar v'lo b'arba'asar. Again, the person comes from a walled city. He goes to an unwalled city. He plans on returning. So he said he reads on the 15th. So that's only true. Ela sha'asar lachzer b'leil arba'asar. Im kodem amud hashachar yotzim yetzim in ha'ir hu dekatani she'no tzarach likros iman. Meaning before dawn, he plans on returning to the walled city. Since he's not going to be there during the day of the 14th, he's not considered to be a resident of an unwalled city. If he's not leaving at night, he's planning on being in an unwalled city on the day of the 14th. Even though the next day he's going to be in the walled city, he's called for that day. He's called an unwalled city, a resident of an unwalled city. He's going to read together with them the night of the 14th and the 14th during the day. And Rashi continues, the same is true. Let's say you go from an unwalled city to a walled city. If he's going to go back on the night of the 15th, he's not going to be there on the day of the 15th. He's not considered to be a resident of the walled city. He follows where he originally came from, the 14th. Even though he's in the walled city at that time, but he's really a resident of the originally of the unwalled city. But let's say again he's not going to return the night of the 15th. So he doesn't need to read the 14th. He doesn't need to read the 14th because he's going to be in a walled city on the 15th. He just waits. He's going to read together in the walled city on the 15th, even though he does plan on returning eventually. In other words, the point is the person, in order to be considered that he's returning, it has to be before dawn of that daytime when that obligation would set in that particular location. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rava says, from where can I prove this idea that if you're there that day, you're considered a resident of that place? Tichsiv, like the pasuk says, Al Ken HaYehudim HaPrazim HaYoshvim Biore HaPrazos. It says the unwalled cities, and they dwell in the unwalled cities. So Michdi Ksiv HaYehudim HaPrazim. The pasuk already says they're the Jews of the unwalled cities. So Lamali Lemichtav HaYoshvim Biore HaPrazos. What are you repeating yourself and saying that they're living in the unwalled cities? Hakamash Malon De Pruz Ben Yomo Nikra Pruz. You see from there that if you're there even for the day, that's considered to be a resident of the unwalled cities. Gemara says, Ashkechon Pruz, I understand by an unwalled city, Mukaf Minal, and how do I know this is true by a walled city as well? Svarhu, the Gemara says it's logical. I mean, the Pruz ben Yomo Kari Pruz, if you're there one day in the unwalled, that day in the unwalled city, you're considered an unwalled resident. So Mukaf ben Yomo Kari Mukaf, the same thing is true by someone who's in a walled city. Even if you're there for the day, you're considered a resident of the walled city. V'yamar Rav, and Rav says further, Ben Kafar Sheholach Le'ir. Let's say you have a person who lives who's from a village and he goes to an unwalled city. Ben Kach uvein Kach Korei Moin. In all situations, he's going to read with those people of that larger city. My time, what's the reason? Hi Kivnei Ho'ir Boy Lemikri. Really, the truth is, someone from a village should have been reading like the people of the city anyway. It was just a leniency we had on the people of the villages, so that they'd be able to supply water and food for their brothers in the cities. So therefore, they had this leniency they can read on the Mondays and Thursdays. But that's if he's in his original place in the village. But if he's already in the city, he should just read like those people in the city. And Rashi over here explains, the case is, again, a person from a village who would really read earlier. He reads on the day of the Monday and Thursday before, and he already read. Then he goes to the city. He's there the night of the 14th. They're reading there on the night of the 14th. Even if he was planning on leaving before the day arrived, he should read the Megillah with them at night, because again, like we said, he really should be reading with them. Really, everybody who lives in unwalled area should be reading on the 14th. It was the Rabbanan who were lenient and said they could go earlier on the Yom HaKanisa, meaning on the Mondays and Thursdays. That's only true when they were lenient if he was already in the village at that time. But if on the 14th he's in a city, he should read with the city. The Gemara continues. Eisvei Abaya asks the following question on what Rava just said. Ben krach sheholach leir ben chuvein kach kori b'mekomo. It says somebody who goes from a walled city to an unwalled city, he has to read like his original place. So first Abai says, Ben Krach Sal Kadaitach, do you think this price is accurate? It can't be somebody from a walled city. So we already said there's no Ben Kach Uvein Kach. It depends when he's going to return. Elolav, rather, how do you have to interpret this brisa? Ben Kfar, we're talking about someone who goes from a village to a city, and we're saying he doesn't read like the city. He reads like his original place. That goes against Rava. So the Gemara answers, didn't you just say, anyway, this brisa is a problem, and you started to change the words around, you answered it up. So Tani Karei Moin, so change the words further, and make it that the person who goes from the village to the city, he has to read together with the people of the city, just like Rava said. The Gemara continues at the two dots, quoting the Mishnah, Mehechan Kori Adam Sa Megillah V'chulu, there was machlokus in the Mishnah, from where do you have to read the Megillah Esther to fulfill the obligation of Kriyas Megillah? So the Gemara says, Tanya, we learned in a brayso, Rav Shimon Bar Yochai Omer, Rav Shimon Bar Yochai says, Mi balayla hahu. In his opinion, you have to start from the 6th parak, where it talks about the fact that Achashverosh couldn't fall asleep. Gemara says, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, and Rabbi Yochanan says, V'kulan mikra echad darshu. Really, all these different opinions, they're all arguing about how to understand the same pasuk, how to darshan the same pasuk. The pasuk says, V'tichtav Esther hamalka Mordechai Yehudi as kol tokef. It says that Esther and Mordechai, they wrote down about all of the power, all of the strength. So Man Damar Kula, the one who says you have to read the entire Megillah, Tokfo shel Achashverosh. The reference over here is to the strength of Achashverosh, and of course, from the beginning of the Megillah, it talks about the power of Achashverosh. The one who says you have to begin from Ish Yehudi, it's because we want to read about the power of Mordechai. The one who says it's from Achar Hadvarim Ha'ela, the beginning of the 3rd parak, Tokfo shel Haman, that's when we begin to recount the power of Haman. The one who says you start from the time that Achashverosh couldn't fall asleep, Tokfo shel Nes, that talks about the power of the actual miracle. That's when the events were set in motion for the miracle to occur. Gemara continues, Rav Huna Amar Mehacha, Rav Huna says from here, from the following pasuk, Umaro al kacho mahigi aleim. They said again, they write about all the things that they saw and all the things that happened, that occurred. So we're going to darshan this pasuk in various ways. Man Damar Kula, the one who says that you have to read the whole Megillah, it means, the pasuk means as follows: Ma'ro Achashverosh neshtamish bekelim shel Beis Hamikdash. What did Achashverosh see fit that he decided to use the vessels of the Beis Hamikdash? And what does it mean al kacha mishum dechashav shivim shinin v'lo ifruk? Because he calculated the 70 years. He thought the 70 years of exile were up, and he saw that the Jews weren't redeemed yet. So so he wanted to celebrate. The Beis HaMikdash is not going to be rebuilt. Uma Higia Aleim, and then what does Ma Higia Aleim refer to? To Qatal Vashti, that he ended up killing Vashti. Now the one who says that you should read the Megillah from Ish Yehudi, that means as follows the pasuk: Ma ra Mordechai dikni b'Haman. What was it that Mordechai saw fit that he should anger Haman? Al kacha deshavi nafshe avodah zara. The reason was because Haman made himself into avodah zara. Uma higia aleim. What does that mean? This rachesh nisa, that a miracle occurred. And the one who says that it's from the pasuk of achar advar me'ela, Mara Haman. So that means, what did Haman see fit? Sheniskani b'chola Yehudim, that he got angry at all of the Jews. Al kacha mishum de Mordechai lo yichrav lo yishtachave. He got angry because Mordechai didn't bow to him. And what eventually happened in the end? V'tolo osov as banav al eitz. He and his children were hung on the gallows. Uman da'amar mibalayla hu. And finally, the one who says that you have to read from the 6th parak by Achashverosh's dream. Mara Achashverosh lahavi a sefer hazechronos. It means, why did Achashverosh see fit to bring before himself the sefer hazechronos to see what happened, who may have done him something that he owes a kindness to. Al kacha dezaminte la Esther lahaman bahadei. Al kacha refers to the fact that Esther invited Haman together with him. And what finally happened in the end is Rachesh Nisa. The miracle occurred. And Rashi over here explains, Umaro al kacha means to say as follows: Ha Megillah nichtav of Nikris. The reason why the Megillah was written and it should be read, Lahodia Ladoros, to tell all generations, Ma roba osu asman sha'asu ma sha'asu. Why did these particular individuals see fit to do what they did? Umefarish al kacha asu. They did it for the following reason. Ulefarish ma'higial osim. And then the Megillah explains what happened to those who did those actions. And the Gemara continues, Amar Bichelbo, Amar Rav Chama bar Gurya, Amar Rav. Rabbi Chelbo says in the name of Rav Chama bar Gurya, in the name of Rav, Halacha kedivrei ha'omer kula. The halacha is that you have to read the entire Megillah. Now, even according to the one who says you read from Ish Yehudi, tzricha should take ksuva kula. You still have to have the whole Megillah written in front of you. Maybe you don't have to read the entire thing, but it has to be a complete Megillah in front of you. Rabbi Chelbo says in the name of Rav Chama bar Gurya, in the name of Rav, Megillah Nikras Sefer v'Nikras Igeres. The Megillah Esther is called a Sefer, meaning it has, in a certain sense, it's like a Sefer Torah. But it's also called an Igeres. It's a letter. It's not as strict as a Sefer Torah. Nikras Sefer, it's called a Sefer, Shem Tafra b'chutei pishtam sula. So you're not allowed to stitch it together using threads of linen, of flax. That would be puzzle. As Rashi over here says, Shem Tafra b'chutei pishtam sula, di'ikal ha'mandamar Meseches Makos Sefer Torah. Shetafra b'pishtam sula. There's such a mandamar Meseches Makos that a Sefer Torah, if you stitch it in that manner with pishtan, that's going to be a problem. That's going to be puzzle. So in that sense, it's considered to be a Sefer. However, v'nikras igeres, but it's also called an igeres, a letter. Shem hitel ba shalosha chutei gidin ksheira. As long as you have three stitches of sinews, that's kosher enough. By a real Sefer Torah, you have to stitch the entire thing. Each piece of parchment has to be stitched completely to the next parchment. But here, you don't need it that much. You just need to stitch it in 3 places. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rav Nachman uvilvad sheyihu meshuloshin. They have to be equidistant from each other, these 3 different stitches. Rashi over here says, v'nikras igeres, it's called an igeres. L'amar she'ina chamura k'sefer, meaning to say it's not as strict as a Sefer Torah. Shu meshuloshin shehe merosh hatvar ad makom tfiras hagid kamimenu v'adagid hasheni. From the top until the place you stitch it should be the exact same distance to the next place you stitch. Umin hasheni l'shlishi kamishlishi l'sov hatvar. Same thing from the second to the third should be the same distance from the third to the end. That's the way you are. That's a leniency you're allowed to have. Again, when it comes to stitching together the various parchments of the Megillah Esther. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shmuel. Rav Yehuda says the name of Shmuel. Hakori b'Megillah, haksuva bein haksuvim. Let's say a person reads a Megillah that's written among other ksuvim. In other words, you have a whole bunch of ksuvim together. Part of it includes the Megillah Esther. As Rashi over here says, in those days they would have all of their svarim were like scrolls. So lo yotzi, you're not yotzi. You can't read a Megillah Esther that's not independent. Amar Rav, and Rav says, Lo Amanal de la Mechsra miyasra porsa. Avla Mechsra miyasra porsa leslan boy. Says it's only true if you can't recognize the area that's Megillah Esther. It's not a little smaller or a little larger than the other. It doesn't have any kind of indent that would show that this is a separate sefer. But if you have an area where it's a little bit, again, it's a little longer, a little shorter, so it has a heker liatzma, as Rashi says, so then that would be okay because that would be considered an independent Megillah. That's what he says. Avol Mechsra miyasra porsa leslan, but it's not an issue if it's a little bit longer or has a little bit shorter or has a little extra. It's not a problem. Levi bar Shmuel have a kakari kami de Rav Yehuda b'Megillah. Levi bar Shmuel, he was reading in front of Rav Yehuda in a Megillah that was. We'll continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Yotes Amud Beis.